Welcome to Oakville Matters. This is where we keep in touch with each other and what matters to our city that calls itself a town and feels like a village. Today, we're going to explore the question of how do we grow and keep those values alive and vibrant for all of us. And with us are Neil Garvey, the Commissioner of Planning, and Gabe Charles, the Director of Planning for the town of Oakville. And gentlemen, we've seen a lot of change in the last few years. My recollection is that starting around 2016, the provincial government began ringing in changes to how we plan and grow. And those changes, if anything, got faster when the government changed in 2018. And here we are. We're now, halfway through maybe the recommendations of the Housing Affordability Task Force, whose cure for housing affordability is to massively increase supply. And it is an old tenet of economics that if you flood the market, the price will fall. Mind you, I'm not sure how we're going to get the people who build the houses to agree to flood the market and cut their prices. So it's going to be an interesting exercise. What's your take, Mr. Commissioner, on how we deal with the fact that we always grow and at the same time we want to be more livable?
Well, it's the delicate balance, and of course, you're very right about the wish or the hope that supply will drive prices down. That's assuming that you're starting at an equilibrium point, because you will spend the next few years trying to catch up from the immigration policy that and changes to student visas and so on that have caused a bit of a housing deficit, especially in the GTA.
So we're starting in the hole. We're 1.5 million homes behind equilibrium, and to get prices down, we've got to get above that, right?
That's the economics of it for sure.
So, Director Charles, I saw something from CMHC the other day saying that we really need 2 million homes to start moving prices. Did you see that? What's your take on that?
There's been a lot of information, I think, that's been coming out recently, whether it was CMHC or the province's task force. And I think everyone seems to be saying that we just, to what Neil's saying, we just don't have enough homes. I think what we've been seeing is that there's, on the supply side, we have homes which are coming, they're in the pipeline, so to speak. What it's coming down to is, can people actually afford these homes? So there's information out there, and a lot of it is sifting through that information, trying to figure out what's the real story.
Well, the real story is prices seem to have gone into a jiggle jaggle in the last year or so, after going up really astonishingly. Like there were 2 years where Oakville average prices went up 50%, which was only good if you owned a home and wanted to sell it, I guess. And if you didn't care about where you were going to go. It's a tough one. So now, we recently signed the housing pledge that we were assigned by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And you guys did a terrific job of explaining that our urban structure, which is to say our transit corridors and our transit intensive nodes, are going to take the brunt of that. I think it all boils down to, how do we get applications? I think over the last year and a half or so, you guys have worked like Hercules to speed up your processes. So are we sitting there waiting for applications? What's happening? Are the applications from the development industry pouring in?
Well, you have said this many times, Mr. Mayor, is that the delivery of housing is a partnership among many players, and the municipality's role is the approval side of things. We don't build them, we don't drive the market, we don't do the marketing, we don't set immigration policy, and at the macro level, the province gives us the population that we're supposed to achieve. So we're actually one of many players in this market, and so to a certain extent, I guess we're waiting for the applications to come in, because we've done significant work in improving our systems, introducing new online tools, and the thing we can't do is solve a supply chain issue or a labor market issue or solve interest rates that are set nationally.
I was had a chat with the premier the other day, in which I was, and he happened to again mention how fond he is, what a big fan he is of Lean Sigma Six, which is basically an analytical approach to try to drop unnecessary steps out of making things. And I was happy to tell him, hey, we had Lean Sigma Six before you did. So, so good on us. Oakville tries to be a leader. Now, when we were discussing the housing pledge, we pointed out that we've got enough housing units in the pipeline to actually meet the pledge. Can you maybe amplify that for the residents who are watching?
Certainly. So over the last couple of years, we've certainly seen, to your point, Mr. Mayor, the influx of applications. And over the last 4 or 5 years, steadily, we've been increasing the number of permits that have been issued. Just last year, it was over 3,000 new residential units were approved, most that we've ever done. And that's just a reflection of I think at the time, the lower interest rates that we'd had. We saw many more development applications coming in. So at this point, we have just over 24,000 units that we can see happening or being realized on the ground over the next 10 years or so. When you look at all of our development applications, all of the units in the pipeline, we're well over 33,000 new residential units. So we're right on track for how we would be meeting the pledge. We expected to hit that 33,000 around 2036 from our 21 starting point. We'll now just be looking at that 5 years sooner. And so we have the applications there. They're coming in, and we're actively reviewing those applications with our partner agencies and town departments. And our intent is to get those things wrapped up as soon as we can, because once the approvals are done, it's really up to the applicants to start pulling those building permits.
Now, I wonder if you two have a view on housing unit size, the mix of housing unit sizes that we need. I recently poured through the Stats Canada information on housing sizes that you get every 5 years from the census. And I compared Oakville to Canada or Ontario. And we have more, let me call it large form or multi-bedroom forms, than we have little stuff. And the paradox here is that I often hear from people complaining that youth, we'll call it between 25 and 35, are underrepresented in our population. And I would conclude from those two things that we probably don't have enough housing forms for single people who are just starting out in life and looking for launching pads, let's call it. And we often hear from residents that we should only build, or we should mostly build 3 and 4 bedroom units. And of those, we seem to have, compared to the province, it looks like a surplus. And evidence that there's a surplus arises from the fact that when you look at the persons per unit that StatsCan reports, the clear implication is that there's a lot of empty bedrooms in town. Or what did that economist call it? Overhoused people. So how do we say, first off, can we even decide what the mix will be, or does the market decide that for us? What's our ability to prescribe unit sizes?
That's a difficult challenge, to be very prescriptive. The more micro your prescriptions are, the less successful they tend to be, because they become restrictive. So it's finding a balance between allowing, the true path to affordability is in your variety of housing that's available. And I think you're right, Mr. Mayor, that we are oversubscribed to large houses with many bedrooms. And I think we need to look at the front end and the back end of the housing spectrum, both the ones that are trying to enter the market and those of us who are reaching the empty nest stage and looking for something different and something smaller to be appropriately sized in our housing types. So it's really about trying to create conditions and policies that would allow for the broadest range of housing types. and making sure that even so, for instance, there's a trend, I guess, to really push in high rises to multi-bedroom apartments, and that is correct. Like in your urban settings, you do need to offer a variety of bedroom types. You also have to weigh that against the construction costs. So the more space you add in a high-rise building, it increases the costs of
per unit.
construction.
The bigger the unit, the more it costs.
Exactly. And so you can have I've heard recently that construction costs are about $1,000 a square foot for high-rise development. So if you need 1,200 square feet for a 3-bedroom unit, you're looking at $1.2 million for that 3-bedroom unit. So you start to price yourself out of all markets. So it's about finding a way to balance and offer a range of housing types for different stages of life.
You know, that's interesting because I get complaints from older people uh, complaining that there's not enough new small things coming on the market for them to downsize, and they've got empty bedrooms, and they would like to, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So, and of course, at public meetings, you also hear from people going, "Oh no, we only want families," uh, and I don't believe that there's a regulatory power for cities, no matter what they call themselves, town, to say, well, we only want this kind of house. Is but you know, am I right? Do we have an authority to say no? You must build only this.
I think other municipalities have tried that in the past. They haven't been overly successful, which is all the reason why when we speak about things like our urban structure and trying to maintain our established neighborhoods, it's about trying to really ensure that the existing housing stock that we have, we can carry on, because there's some who may want a smaller house. They don't want to go to an apartment, they want a bungalow, but the builders they're not building the bungalows. There's no value in it to them. So it becomes really difficult for us to try to mandate building a story or a story and a half unit when there really isn't the saleable market. So we want to try and maintain the existing stock that we have and look at how we transition. So to Neil's point about the costing, what we've been seeing is over the last little while is a trend towards wanting to do more of the mid-rise and the tall buildings that we're seeing in our pipeline. We were surprised at just how quickly it came online. We were expecting to have those maybe in 5 years, but they started coming at us even a few years ago. So the trend is there, and I think the market's starting to realize what the cost is. So how do we get more people into these different forms as opposed to just the straight grade related housing? So that's what allows that transition for those who may be overhoused to move into something which is more suiting their lifestyle, but also
Well, I know
that stock.
two things on this. I recently read there's a city in California that tried to be super exclusive. They actually carried out a program, and apparently in the United States, cities may have more power. Huntington Beach was famous for only allowing family homes. And the state of California recently announced they're suing them for some kind of sin against equality and access to housing. And we're going to bust that, apparently. But, you know, I've recently been watching the real estate ads, and here's something interesting that I've noticed. There are condo buildings all over town, I've discovered, with 2.5 and 3-bedroom condos. And they're bigger than 1,200 feet, 1,800 feet. And there's a cluster of them in Bronte that date from the late 70s, early 80s, where, you know, there still isn't any, I mean, it's not a transit route, it's not a transit node. And Lord knows 40 years ago it was no such thing, and yet there they are. And across from Town Hall, in 2 directions, there's apartment towers where, lo and behold, I discovered there's 2.5 and 3-bedroom units in those too. So I conclude that there's apparently there's always been a demand for some of these larger units. But when I look at those buildings, I see there's a rich mix of sizes, including little things as well as big things. So I do know that we're hearing we're being, there's a sort of a push me, pull me input from the public coming in. We want places to downsize and we only want families. And isn't it great to be caught in the middle and get to make recommendations to council?
Well, that's so true. And I think there, as you're seeing, Mr. Mayor, is that there's a lot more elasticity in the market of existing homes. The margins are really tight on new construction, so you tend to have a more uniform pricing in your newer areas. Where you get more flexibility is in your older areas, and you do see somewhat more affordable units, larger units that were built earlier on that may need some renovations. But there is definitely something to be said for looking at your two stocks, your new stock and your existing stock, differently. I think there's a lot of merit in that.
Well, I do notice when I was doing that research that the new stuff, just as you said, it's 1,000 a foot and up, 1,000, 1,200, even 1,500 out there. And the old stock, their price seems to be pulled up toward the cost of the new stuff. It makes sense as an economist. That makes sense to me. So they're selling for 800 to 1,000 or even more a foot, the old stock. And so I guess maybe the difference is somebody's idea of how much renovation is required to, bring it up to modern tastes or something. Meanwhile, can you give us a macro view of, I'm pretty sure that over the next 10 years, all of the 33,000 units are not going to be condos. What's the mix? We've still got a lot of ground form to build, I think, don't we?
We do. So north of Dundas in the most recent new community, there's certainly a good range of housing typologies that we'll see, whether they're singles, semis, towns, back-to-backs. There's definitely a full range, but also throughout North Oakville, especially along the Trafalgar corridor, we'll see more of the mid-rise and the tall buildings. So in the 8-story up to 30 stories in some cases, which really provides that full choice. So as you were alluding to earlier, Mr. Mayor, is giving people the choice to be able to have different opportunities for housing, what fits their lifestyle, what fits their family makeup, etc. So what can be possible for them. So that is primarily where we're seeing that, and we expect that will still last us at least another 8 to 10 years to continue to build out North Oakville up towards Burnhamthorpe, and the rest of the areas will primarily be mid-rise and tall buildings, whether that's in our urban growth center as Midtown, at Trafalgar Dundas, at Regional Road 25 in Dundas. So there's more opportunities throughout. And then we can't forget our Broad to Go major transit station area, which we expect to really start to move in the next 10 years as well.
Yeah, I saw some 3-bedroom units in as little as 1,100, 1,200 feet range. And you suggested that 1,200 is sort of a 3-bedroom. I took it that's kind of a minimum. But it made me smile inside because when I was a kid, the first house that we ever owned was a 900-foot bungalow with 3 bedrooms. And yeah, they were tall, they were small. My 2 brothers and I had the smallest bedroom and a triple deck bunk. And I got the top bunk. And my nose, you had to slide in, you couldn't sit up. But it made you aspire to more, I guess is the way to look at it. So that sounds like an eclectic mix, and we're not about to turn into East Germany where everything is the same thing. Or actually some places I saw in my world travels where it looked like platoons of soldiers, every tower, nothing but towers, like soldiers in a squad formation, right? And they're all the same height, they all looked exactly the same. And I gather we like a little more variety in the way things look. And that's a thing. I'd like you guys to talk a little bit about the urban design guidelines that have achieved something that we used to be told we could never do. When I started, we were told you could never tell people what things had to look like. And when we did the Livable Oakville official plan in between 2007 and 2009, we incorporated by reference, we had a line in there that referred to an urban design guideline manual or something that we were going to create. And nobody appealed that. And now I find applications coming forward, and ever since I've seen applications coming forward where you guys are telling people, well, it really should look this other way. Can you explain that for people? Because it seems like we got a little bit of a gain, and you've been using it.
Yeah, just before Gabe describes our process, I just want to say on Andres Duany, the great urban planner and designer, he had this phrase: a good urban design is not necessarily about the look, it's about look and feel, because otherwise you won't get cookie cutter, you'll just get nicer looking cookies. So it's about creating a variety on your street, and I think Oakville does that well, and Gabe can describe that in more detail.
And it's interesting the reference you make, Mr. Mayor, because 15, 20 years ago, we were in the same situation then as we are now, where we couldn't get into things like talking about architecture and et cetera, and getting into the minutia. That changed about 15 years ago. And so we really built upon that. And to Neil's point, the focus wasn't necessarily on saying you can't paint your building pink. It was more, how do you structure the building? How do you ensure that it has good access to it? How are you addressing the public realm and dealing with shadowing? And that was, from an exterior design perspective, those were the main things that we were continuing to focus on. So although that piece has been stripped out as a result of the latest legislative changes, we still strive to make sure that we're building the right community, that they're walkable, that they're transit friendly, that we're giving people, again, that choice, but also that the buildings themselves are really fitting into the communities, that they're contributing to the community, and that it's adding to the vitality and the livability.
So it sounds like you're saying form will follow function. And if you get people to focus on how it works and how it functions, you get the benefit of a better form or a better look.
Yeah, you do. And I think too, the one thing that we benefit from here in Oakville is that a lot of the developers and the builders, they really want to make sure that they have great product, that they're not just attractive, but they do function well, and that people want to. A lot of people, they come to Oakville because they really like the area code. Basically, you know, that's something that really attracts them to this area. And so the builders, the developers, they want to keep them here, and so they do offer product that we don't have to do a lot of work on that side of it. It's more on the orientation and the arrangement, and ensuring that the next guy that follow that they're all working well together.
I think
well, it makes such sense, Mr. Charles, because look at how much money they're investing to build a building. It'd be crazy to build a building that nobody would buy, right? So I get it that they have the biggest incentive of all to make it look good and attractive. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's okay. I think in Oakville's case, the adage that greatness builds greatness, I think is really the case. A long history of achieving high quality development, which snowballs into people desiring to do their best for Oakville. So, and I think that's the leadership that council shows, and certainly staff have had a strong hand in that over the years.
Well, I know that there's a premium. People can, I know of cases where the same builder built the same house on the same size lot. One house in Oakville, one house in Whitby, not to pick on Whitby, the Oakville of Durham. And the Oakville product was 20% more. Like what I'm saying is, I believe that if you're selling in Oakville, you get more for your product because people will pay more to be here. And I think that we often hear from people that it's, you know, the trails, the parks, and the lovely people, because we're friendly, that drive that sense of premium. And Mr. Director, you talked about variety on our streets. We only have a couple of minutes, but one of the main mechanisms of the Livable Oakville plan is to try to conserve the character of our stable, established neighborhood streets where we live, and to direct growth to the transit nodes and transit corridors. And some of our neighborhoods there's not a lot of variety, and whatever variety there is where you live, you generally like it the way it is, and more density is not what you're on for. So how do we deal with that? I think there's a conundrum there, but that you've got a whole 2 minutes to try to wiggle out of here on variety on the streets where we live.
Yeah, interesting question. And it's trying to ensure that the variety is trying to ensure that we're not regulating taste in a way, that we're really ensuring that we're focused towards getting the best, that the buildings fit and that they're contributing to that public realm. And the latest changes through the bill allows for properties to add residential units that we can't say no to, up to 3 per property. And what we need to ensure is that those are being done in a way that makes sense for the neighborhoods, that fits in, that is more surgical as opposed to demolish and rebuild. So that's our task over the next little while, is to make sure that we're doing those well.
So what can you say in 30 seconds or less? What say do we have over those extra 3 units? Can I just go out and just do it, or do I have to come to you?
We can't say no to adding the units, but what we can do is help applicants shape how those units get added into properties through our zoning bylaw and our building permit reviews.
So they still have to apply. They can't just call up a contractor.
Correct.
And what do they apply for?
At this point,
a building permit?
Yes, they'd be applying for a building permit, and where they want to put an addition onto a house, for example, it doesn't quite fit from a zoning perspective, then we have to look at that through minor variance process, for example. So we still have some checks and balances.
All right. Well, that is for many people, a happy note for us to end on. And I thank you for the time that you gave us today, and I thank you for watching. And I hope this has been helpful to you. And I want you to know that we're always here at Oakville Matters to answer your questions, and you can reach me at mayor@oakville.ca if you want to suggest a future topic. Thanks very much for being with us. See you next time.